The smell came first. Manure and roasted grain, the sharp iron taste of a town that kept its livestock
Look at
closer
how
than
they
its
move
neighbors.
together.
Silas
respond to
Harding
you.
drove the
It's
mule
beautiful.
cart down Dryfield's main road at the
See
pace
this
of a
golden
man
comb?
with
It's
nowhere to
special.
go
Wow,
and
I've never
preferred
seen
it
one
that
like
way.
that.
This is
He
royal
needed
jelly,
candle
very
salt
rare.
in a new
Amazing.
tobacco tin
The
because
night
the
is
old one
quiet,
had
but we
rusted
must
through the
remain
bottom.
vigilant.
That
Aye,
was all,
the shadows
in
hide
and
much.
out.
Let's press
The
on.
cartwheels caught every rut. The morning sun pressed against his neck like a hand he didn't want there. His fingers gripped the reins tighter than necessary, the tremor in his hands making the leather jump. 3 years of this. 3 years of driving into town once a month, buying what he needed, driving back. 3 years of people looking away when he passed. He didn't blame them. Helen's General Store sat at the east end of Main Street, its windows catching the light in a way that made them look cleaner than they were. The bell above the door would ring when he entered. Helen would already have his supplies ready on the counter without asking. She always did. But first he had to pass the water trough at the town center, and that's where he saw the cage. The iron bars caught the sun and threw it back hard enough to hurt. Silas squinted. The cage sat on a heavy wagon bed, welded bars on one side like livestock transport, but built for something bigger. Two men stood near it, arms crossed, studying with the dull fascination of people who had nothing better to examine. Inside the cage, a woman sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She was Orc. Green skin, prominent jaw, the tips of small tusks that hadn't fully grown. She was smaller than any Orc Silas had seen lean-built, where her kind usually ran broad. Younger, too, maybe 27, 28. Her clothes were rough-spun cotton stained with road dust and something darker near the collar. Her feet were bare, dirty. One of the men spat tobacco juice near the wheel. This one won't last a day on a farm. The Orc merchant sat on an overturned barrel, picking dried meat from his teeth with a fingernail. He was massive bored, wearing the expression of someone who'd made this speech too many times already. Last one was, he said, had 3, sold 2 in Harwick. This one nobody wants. The second man leaned against the wagon. Why not? Too small, the merchant said. He gestured at the woman without looking at her. Orc won't take her, say she's defective. Humans won't take her, say she's still Orc. Been trying to sell her for a week. What's wrong with her? The woman's voice cut through before the merchant could answer. Clear, sharp, like a blade that had been honed on purpose. Nothing's wrong with me. I'm sitting in a key. That's what's wrong. The merchant kicked to the bars, not hard, just enough to make them ring. Shut it. Make me. You've been trying for a week. How's that going? The 2 men laughed. The merchant didn't. Neither did Silas. He should have kept driving. He had candles to buy salt, a rusted tin to replace. He had 6 mason jars of mountain honey in the cart bed and a block of beeswax. That was his trade for the year. Everything he'd harvested from 6 hives that were barely holding on. 6 jars, that was it. But his hands wouldn't move on the reins, and the woman's eyes stayed on him, not begging, not afraid, just reading him the way you read weather to decide if it'll pass quick or settle in. He needed to leave. He had candles waiting. His feet didn't move. What do you want for her? Silas heard himself ask. The merchant's eyebrows went up. You serious? I asked the price. Coin's good. Anything you got. Silas jerked his thumb toward the cart bed. I don't carry coin. I've got 6 jars of mountain honey and a block of beeswax. That's my trade. The merchant laughed. It was an ugly sound. Honey for an Orc. Honey for whatever's in that cage. Take it or don't. The merchant looked at the woman, then at Silas, then at the 2 men who'd already lost interest and were turning away toward the saloon. He chewed the inside of his cheek. All right, honey and wax, but you take her as is, no returns, no complaints. Wasn't planning on either. Silas unloaded the jars onto the beeswax block. The merchant opened the cage door. The woman sat still for a moment, watching the open door like it was another kind of trap. You coming? Silas asked. Where? My farm, 5 miles north. Why, because I just traded 6 jars of honey for you, and I'd like to leave before he changes his mind. She climbed down from the cage. Her bare feet touched dirt, and she flinched just slightly. The soles were cut up, but she straightened immediately like it hadn't happened at all. I won't be your servant, she said, and didn't ask for one. Or your wife. Definitely didn't ask for that. Then what? Silas climbed onto the cart. I keep bees. They need tending. I'm told the Orc have a way with them. Who told you that? Nobody. I made it up. Get on the cart. She stared at him. He stared back. The mule shifted its weight and sighed, which seemed like the most honest thing said so far. She got on the cart. She sat as far from him as the wooden bench allowed, which wasn't far. Her hands gripped the edge like she was about to jump. Like escape was always 1 second away if she just timed it right. "What's your name?" Silas asked as the mule pulled them onto the road. "Asha." Silas didn't ask. "I know, I told you anyway." The dust rose from the road in waves that made the hills shimmer. Asha sat rigid on the cart, her eyes moving across the landscape with the quick attention of someone counting exits. "Is this road always this bad?" she asked. Silas didn't answer. The potholes were deep enough to snap an axle. He should fill them. He wouldn't. "That fence is leaning. See it, third post from the bend." Silence. "It's not your fence." "No, but whose is it?" "Don't know, don't care." "You don't care about much, do you?" "I care about getting home before dark." Silence settled for maybe 30 seconds. It was the longest she'd been quiet since leaving Dryfield. "Why do you live 5 miles from town?" "Because 6 seemed excessive." "Is that a joke?" "Closest I get." She studied his face. His jaw was clenched tight enough to cut rope. The lines around his eyes came from squinting at light and everything else. His hands were rough scarred. The knuckles were swollen in a way that suggested old breaks had healed without a doctor's help. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What were you expecting?" "Someone who talks more. Men who buy people usually talk a lot. Explain why they're doing it. Tell you how grateful you should be." She picked at a loose thread on her dress. "You didn't explain anything." "Nothing to explain. You traded honey for an orc girl you've never met. That needs explaining." Silas guided the mule around a deep pothole without answering. The cart lurched. Asha grabbed the seat. "There's bread in the box behind you," he said, "if you're hungry." She didn't reach for it. She kept watching him, trying to find the angle, the trick, the moment when the trap closed. It didn't close. After another mile, she reached back and took the bread. She ate it in small, careful bites. "Good bread," she said mostly to herself. "Helen makes it." "The store owner?" "Yeah." She looked at me like I was human. "Helen looks at everyone like that. It's annoying." The farm smelled like wood smoke and something sweeter underneath, maybe clover or the faint waxy scent of beehives that hadn't been properly tended in too long. The house sat dark against the tree line, windows shuttered, door closed. The place looked locked from the inside and forgotten. Silas drove the cart past the house without stopping, heading straight for the barn. "Isn't that your house?" Asha asked, pointing back over her shoulder. "It is." "Then why are we going to the barn?" "Because I sleep there." She waited for more. He didn't give it. He climbed down from the cart, unhitched the mule, and led it into a stall with the practiced ease of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Asha stood at the barn entrance. The place was cleaner than she'd expected. Swept floor tools hung neatly, a cot in the far corner. "You really live here," she said. "I really do." "And you own a house." "I do." "Why?" Silas lit the oil lamp. The warm light made the place look almost livable. "There's another cot in the storage room. I'll get it." "Why?" "I heard you." He set the lamp down and looked at her directly. His eyes were the color of used dishwater. Gray, faded, tired. "The house is full of memories. I don't sleep good with memories." Asha stared at him. Something changed in her face, not sympathy, closer to recognition. "I know that feeling," she said. Silas pulled a second cot out from behind a stack of feed sacks. He set it on the opposite side of the barn from his, against the wall where the wood was newer. "Blankets are there," he pointed. "Outhouse is 20 paces east, behind the barn. Water pumps by the house." He paused. "Door doesn't lock from either side." "What if I leave?" "Then you leave." "What if I take something?" "Then I'll have less." "You're not worried about what?" "That I'll rob you and vanish." Silas sat on his cot and pulled off his boots. "You've been in a cage for a week. You're barefoot. You're hungry. You don't know the area. You won't rob me tonight." He paused. "Maybe next week." Asha's mouth twitched. She caught it and stopped it before it became a smile. She took the blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders, and sat on the cot with her back to the wall. She didn't lie down. She watched him like she'd been watching him all day, measuring, testing, waiting for her turn. Silas blew out the lamp. The barn plunged into darkness, broken only by the thin moonlight through the gaps. "Good night, Asha." No answer. He didn't expect one. He lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling beams, listening to the familiar sounds. The mule shifting in its stall, the wind keening through the eaves, the faint pulse of something living in the walls, probably mice. And now underneath all of it, the sound of someone else breathing. It had been 3 years since he'd heard that sound. He'd forgotten how loud quiet company could be. The cold morning light crept into the barn, cutting the floor into bars. Silas woke to a sound he didn't recognize. Rhythmic tapping, the scrape of wood on wood coming from outside. He pulled on his boots and stepped into daylight. The air was cold. Frost still clung to the grass. He followed the sound past the water pump, past the withered garden, past the woodpile, to the back of the property where 6 beehives stood in a crooked row. 3 were intact. 2 leaned on their bases. One was shattered, its box cracked open. Frames scattered, the wax exposed and dark with age. Asha knelt beside the broken hive. She was pulling out frames, laying them on the ground. Her hands moved through the debris with a focus that was almost tender, turning each piece over, examining the wax, picking out dead bees with her fingertips. "What are you doing?" Silas asked. "Looking. Didn't tell you to touch them." "Didn't tell me not to." She lifted a frame. The wax was dark but intact, a thin line of honey gleaming along one edge. "This hive isn't dead. The queen moved. She's in there." She pointed to the tilted hive beside it. "Took what was left of the colony with her." Silas moved closer. "How do you know?" "Because I can hear them." She pressed her ear to the side of the tilted hive. 60, maybe 70 workers. Not enough to survive winter, but enough to rebuild if we combine colonies. The bees increased, their hum rising. She set the frame down. "These hives are falling apart. When's the last time you tended them?" "I have tended them." "You've tended 3 of them. The other 3 you've neglected." Silas's jaw tightened. "I had 6 hives 2 years ago. Lost 3 after that." He stopped, breathed, started again. "I lost 3. Asha watched him the way she watched everything, direct, unblinking, waiting for what came after the silence. "I can fix this," she said. "Didn't ask you to." "I'm not asking permission. I'm just telling you what I can do." She picked up a piece of the broken hive box. "This wood's still good. It's the joints that failed, not the boards. I need a hammer, some nails, and sealant. Pine resin?" "Pine resin works." "Where?" He pointed toward the barn. She stood and walked past him without another word. Silas watched her go. This woman who'd been in a cage yesterday, barefoot, half-starved, rope burn marks around her wrists, now walking his land like she owned it. She came back with a hammer, a box of nails, and a jar of resin he'd forgotten he had. She knelt beside the broken hive and started rebuilding it, fitting the boards together, sealing the gaps, working with a precision that seemed to come from somewhere deep. Silas stood there, arms at his sides, not knowing whether to be angry or impressed. He settled on confused, which seemed like a reasonable middle ground. By noon, the hive was reassembled. It wasn't pretty. The seams were rough, the base slightly crooked, but it was solid. Asha set it upright and stepped back. "Now we split the combined hive. Move half the bees to this one. They'll follow the comb. You've done this before. My grandmother kept hives before the raids, before everything." She wiped her hands on her dress. "It's the only thing I know that nobody's taken from me." Silas looked at the rebuilt hive. Something cracked and destroyed, put back together with nails and resin and the knowledge of a girl nobody wanted. "Broken things still have their use," she said. She said it to the hive, not to him, but he heard it anyway. They spent the rest of the afternoon splitting the colony, worked the frames with bare hands. No smoke, no gloves, no hesitation. The bees landed on her arms and stayed moving slowly as she hummed something low under her breath. "They don't sting you," Silas said. "They have no reason." "Bees don't need a reason. Everything needs a reason. Bees sting when they're afraid. I don't make them afraid." "Help up." "I move slow, and I'm warm. Warm, orc body temperature runs higher than human. Bees like warmth." She transferred a frame to the rebuilt hive. "Your hands are cold. That's why they sting you." Silas looked at his hands. She wasn't wrong. His fingers were always cold, had been for years. Since before the farm, since before the accident, since before everything else. "Will you teach me?" he asked. "Will you listen?" "Probably not." "Good, I'll teach you anyway." By evening, all 6 hives stood in a single row, all upright, all sealed, all humming. Silas stood at the edge of the yard watching the last of the bees return to their entrances as the light faded. Asha walked up beside him, arms crossed, the blanket from the barn draped over her shoulders. "Tomorrow we fix the other 2 hive stands," she said. "The smoker needs a new bellows." "You're planning." "Someone has to. You've been letting this place die." "I've kept it alive." "Barely." He wanted to argue, couldn't, because she was right and they both knew it. "Dinner," he said. "What have you got?" "Beans. Bread if there's any left." "I ate the bread on the cart." "Then just beans." They walked back to the barn. Silas heated the beans on a small stove near the door. They ate sitting on their separate cots, tin bowls, in their laps, the fire throwing long shadows on the walls. "Silas." "What?" "Don't trade honey for people again. It's weird." He almost laughed. Almost. The sound died somewhere in his chest, but the shape of it stayed on his face for a second longer than he expected. "All right," he said. That night she slept on the cot. He even heard her breathing go out, not deep, not surrendered completely, but closer to rest than the night before. He lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling beams and thinking about beehives. 6 colonies all alive for the first time in 2 years. All because of 6 jars of honey and a woman in a cage who could hear 60 bees through wood and knew how to make broken things whole again. The kitchen smelled like old wood and absence. Silas stood in the doorway on the 4th morning, watching Asha move through the space like she was claiming territory 1 inch at a time. She'd opened the shutters without asking. Light poured across the floor in strips that showed 3 years of dust. "You planning to come in?" she asked. She was wiping down the table with a rag that had seen better days. "Wasn't." "Then stop standing there like a ghost at his own funeral." He came in. The floorboards creaked under his weight in a way that sounded like complaint, like the house resented being lived in again. Asha had already cleared the cobwebs from the corners, swept the floor, arranged the canned goods on the shelves by height. The stove was cold but clean. The chairs were pulled in tight to the table. Everything looked ready for people who weren't coming. His eyes caught on the coat hook near the door, empty now. The small coat that had hung there for 3 years was gone. "Where?" "In the box by the door," Asha said without turning around. She wrung out the rag into a bucket. "I didn't throw it away, just moved it somewhere it won't stab you every time you walk past." The box sat against the wall, wooden, lid closed. Inside would be Sarah's coat folded careful. Probably the scarf, too. The gloves with the holes in the fingers she'd never let him mend. "You had no right," he started. "I know." She turned to face him. "But someone had to do it, and you weren't going to." The table sat between them. 2 chairs, the weight of 3 years pressed down from the ceiling beams. "This isn't yours to change," he said. "This isn't a shrine," she said back. "It's a kitchen, and I'm tired of eating beans in a barn when there's a perfectly good stove right here." She picked up a jar from the shelf. Mason jar, honey inside amber in the morning light. "You've got 12 jars of honey left from last year," she said. "Old harvest, going to waste because you're too busy punishing yourself to sell them." "They're not going to waste because they're sitting in a dark cupboard while you live on beans and guilt." She set the jar on the table between them. "I'm making creamed honey. Family recipe. Grandmother taught me before they kicked me out. You're going to help." "I don't know how." "That's why I said help, not do it yourself." She was already pulling down more jars, lining them up on the counter. Her movements were efficient, practiced. The movements of someone who'd learned to work fast because hesitation got you hurt. "Get the big wooden spoon," she said, "the one with the crack in the handle." He knew which one. Sarah had used it for everything. Stirring soup, mashing potatoes, tapping the rhythm on the table edge when she was thinking through a problem. His hands shook when he picked it up. Asha pretended not to notice. She opened 4 jars of honey and poured them into the largest bowl they had. The honey moved slow golden, catching the light like something precious, which it was. 4 jars was half his remaining stock. "This seems wasteful," he said. "This seems like business," she corrected. "Creamed honey sells for 3 times what liquid does. Your 12 jars become worth 36, unless you'd rather keep eating beans." She handed him a smaller jar of crystallized honey. "Add this, slow." He poured, too fast. The crystallized chunks hit the liquid honey and sank like stones. "I said slow." This is slow. This is you having no patience in bad hands. She took the jar from him and demonstrated. A thin stream controlled the crystals distributing evenly through the liquid. Then she handed it back. He tried again. Poured too fast. The jar slipped. Honey splashed onto the table. God damn it. Again. In third try, he overcorrected, poured too slow. The stream broke into drops that scattered across the bowl's rim. How do you keep bees if you can't pour honey? She asked. I harvest it. I don't cook with it. Clearly, she was smiling, not much. Just the corner of her mouth pulling up like it was testing the motion, seeing if her face remembered how. He tried a fourth time. The jar slipped again. Honey hit the table, the floor somehow got on his sleeve. Asha laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, wasn't loud, but it was real coming from somewhere deep, and it filled the kitchen like light through a crack. What? He said. You. She was trying to stop biting her lip, but it kept breaking through. You keep bees for a living, for 10 years, and you can't pour honey without wearing it. The jar's slippery. Your hands are shaking. They always shake. Not like this. She was still smiling. You're nervous. I'm not nervous. Well, you're terrified of cooking. A man who works with 60,000 stinging insects is scared of a recipe. He looked at the honey on his sleeve, the puddle on the table, the bowl that was somehow half empty even though they'd barely started. And he laughed, not long, not easy, like a door that hadn't opened in years and the hinges were rusted. But the sound came out rough and real, and it hung in the air between them. Asha's smile widened, showed teeth, showed the broken tusk on the left side that hadn't grown right. There, she said quietly, that's better. They finished the creamed honey together. It took 2 hours and 3 more spilled jars before he got the rhythm right. By the end, they had 8 jars of creamed honey, golden and smooth, ready to sell at twice the price of regular. Town markets in 3 days, Asha said, sealing the last jar. We'll take these, get you some real money. You're not leaving me here. I want to see something besides your barn. You've seen the house? The house is a barn with furniture. I want to see people. You won't like people. I don't like anyone. That's not the point. The afternoon was warm enough that they ate lunch on the porch. Bread and cheese, the last of the good cheddar from Helen's store. Asha sat on the top step, her back against the post eyes scanning the tree line like she was reading a text written in branches and birds. How'd you end up in that cage? Silas asked. She was quiet for a while, long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she touched the broken tusk with her tongue, a habit she probably didn't know she had. I was 5, she said, fell out of a tree, landed face first on a rock, broke the tusk clean through. It grew back wrong, too small, crooked. She picked at the bread crust. In orc culture, tusks are everything. They measure strength, lineage, right to lead. Broken tusk means broken bloodline, means you're not fit to carry the family name. That's insane. That's tradition. She said it flat, like she'd explained this 100 times and stopped expecting it to make sense. My family is Iron Fang. We control 40% of the iron mines in the Northern Territories. Have for 200 years. When I turned 22, the elders said I couldn't inherit. Broken tusk, broken claim. They cast me out. Your family just let them. My family is the elders. She tore the bread into smaller pieces. My father didn't fight it, said the clan comes first. Always. Silas thought about that, about a father choosing legacy over his daughter, about traditions that valued symbols more than people. 5 years I've been gone, Asha continued. Worked odd while stayed moving. Torvon found me 6 months ago in a border town, offered me work as a laborer. I didn't know he was a slaver until we were 2 days from any settlement. Why didn't you run? I did, 3 times. He caught me every time. She showed him her wrists. The rope burns were still pink, still healing. 4th time he put me in the cage. Said I'd stay there until someone bought me or I starved. He wasn't picky which. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere beyond the property line, a crow called out sharp and singular. My turn, she said. The boy, Emmett, tell me. Silas's hands started shaking harder. He set the bread down before he dropped it. 3 years ago, he said. I had 8 hives then, strong colonies, good honey production. I was working hive number 7 doing a split, left it open while I went inside to get water. 30 seconds. maybe less. He could still see it, the back door, the pump, the glass of water in his hand. Emmett was the neighbor's kid, 8 years old, curious about everything. He must have wandered over, seen the open hive, probably thought it looked interesting. How many stings? 43. They found him 20 feet from the hive unconscious. His throat was swelling shut by the time the doctor got there. Asha waited, didn't push, just sat there with the bread forgotten in her hands. He lived, Silas continued, but his lungs never recovered. Something about the venom, the allergic reaction. He can't run now, can't play like other kids. Every breath is harder than it should be. And the town blames you. The town's right to blame me. I left the hive open. I walked away. A child paid the price for my carelessness. Carelessness and cruelty are different. Tell that to Emmett. Tell that to his father who has to listen to his son wheeze every night. Asha set the bread down, turned to face him full on. You made a mistake, she said. One mistake in 30 seconds, and you've been punishing yourself for 3 years. Some mistakes don't get forgiven. Some people don't let themselves be forgiven. She stood up, brushed crumbs off her dress. There's a difference. She went inside. He stayed on the porch, hands shaking bread untouched, thinking about broken tusks and broken hives and all the ways people learn to carry damage. That night, Silas slept in the house for the first time in 3 years. Not the barn, the actual house, in the bedroom at the end of the hall. Asha took the smaller room in the back. She didn't ask permission, just carried her blanket in and shut the door. He lay in the dark listening to the house settle. Different sounds than the barn. The wood contracted and expanded with temperature changes. The wind hit the walls instead of slipping through gaps. Everything was tighter, closer, like the building was holding its breath. Down the hall, he heard Asha moving around, opening drawers, testing the mattress, the small sounds of someone claiming space. He stared at the ceiling and thought about Sarah, how she used to sleep on her side, one hand tucked under the pillow, how she'd hum in her sleep, sometimes tuneless, just vibration, how the house had felt full even when it was just the two of them. Now it had 3 ghosts, Sarah's memory, his guilt, and Asha's presence, which was somehow more solid than both. The market in Dryfield ran every Saturday. Farmers and merchants set up tables in the square near the water trough, sold produce, livestock, tools, anything that could be traded for coin or barter. Silas drove the cart into town with Asha beside him. She wore the boots she'd found in Sarah's closet. They fit better than his had. She'd also tied her hair back with a strip of leather, pulled it tight enough that you could see the line of her jaw, the broken tusk, the scar that ran from her temple to her cheekbone. People stared. Silas had expected that. What he hadn't expected was Asha staring back, direct, unblinking, daring them to say something. Nobody did. They set up their table near Helen's store, 8 jars of creamed honey arranged in a row. The morning light made them glow like captured sun. Helen came over within 5 minutes. She looked at the Maz, then at Asha, then at Silas with an expression that was equal parts knowing and approving. Creamed honey, Helen said. Haven't seen that in years. Who taught you? She did, Silas said, nodding at Asha. The family recipe? Asha added. Helen picked up a jar, turned it in the light. How much? $12. That's 3 times regular price. That's because it's 3 times the work. Helen smiled, set the jar down, picked up 2. I'll take these, and I'll spread the word. You'll sell out by noon. She was right. By 11:30, they were down to 2 jars. A steady stream of customers, most of them curious about the orc woman selling honey in the square. Some whispered, some stared. One man asked Asha directly if she was safe to be around. Safer than you, she'd answered. He'd bought 2 jars. Silas was counting the money when the merchant arrived. Not Torvon, different man, older, gray-bearded, riding a horse that had seen better days. He pulled up to their table and dismounted with the slow care of someone whose joints hurt. He looked at Asha, looked again. His eyes went wide. You're Asha Ironfang, he said. The square didn't go quiet, but it got quieter. Heads turned. People leaned in to listen. Asha's face went carefully blank. You're mistaken. I'm not. The merchant stepped closer. I worked the northern mines 15 years back. Saw you at the summer festivals. You were 12, maybe 13, already learning the business from your grandmother. He smiled. It wasn't unkind. You broke your tusk falling out of the old oak by the river. Whole camp talked about it for weeks, about what it would mean for the succession. Asha said nothing, but her hands, which had been arranging the last two jars, went still. I heard the elders cast you out, the merchant continued. Heard they said you couldn't lead. Stupidest decision they ever made. You had more sense at 13 than most of them have now. He tipped his hat. Good to see you alive, Lady Ironfang. You deserve better than what they gave you. He walked away before she could respond. The square stayed quiet for another 3 seconds. Then the whispers started. Low at first, then building like wind before a storm. Silas packed up the remaining jars, moved fast. Asha helped without speaking, her movements automatic practiced, the movements of someone who'd learned to retreat before the enemy regrouped. They were in the cart and moving before anyone could ask questions. Halfway home, Asha finally spoke. You're going to ask. I am. I'm the heir to Ironfang, she said. Or I was. My family controls the largest iron mining operation in the Northern Territories. 40% of all iron production in 3 states. 200 years of operation, 12,000 employees, assets worth somewhere around $40 million. Silas kept his eyes on the road. That's a lot of iron. It's a legacy, and I couldn't inherit it because my tusk broke when I was 5 years old. That's insane. That's Orc law, written 200 years ago by men who thought physical perfection proved divine right. She pulled her knees up on the cart seat. The elders gave the succession to my cousin, Darroch. He's got perfect tusks, perfect bloodline, and the business sense of a drunk mule. Last I heard, he's run 3 mines into the ground and lost $2 million in bad contracts. They kicked you out for a broken tusk and gave it to someone incompetent. Welcome to tradition. They rode in silence for another mile. The road wound through forest here trees, pressing close on both sides. Why didn't you tell me? Silas asked. Would you have bought me if you knew I was worth $40 million? So I bought you because you were an abatagist. Exactly. She looked at him. You didn't see an investment. You saw a person. That's rarer than you think. The house appeared through the trees, smoke rising from the chimney that Asha must have lit before they left. 6 hives in the back, all humming. 12 if you counted the ones they'd planned to build next month. Home for whatever that was worth. They're going to come for you, Silas said as he pulled the cart to a stop. Your family, the elders, whoever wants to use you for that inheritance. I know. You can't hide here forever. I know that too. She climbed down from the cart. But I can hide here today, and tomorrow, and however many days after that until they find me. She grabbed one of the empty honey crates, started carrying supplies toward the house. Besides, you need help with those hives. You'd kill them all in a month without me. I kept them alive 3 years before you got here. Barely. She was smiling, though, just a little. Someone has to make sure broken things stay useful. That night, Silas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to the house creak, thinking about iron mines and broken tusks and the way Asha had stood in that square while people whispered her name like both prayer and curse. She was worth $40 million and living in a barn. She could command an empire and was teaching him to pour honey. She had more right to bitterness than anyone he had ever met, and she'd spent the morning laughing about spilled jars, broken things she'd said, still have their use. Maybe she was right. Maybe they both were broken enough to understand what that meant. The week after the market, Asha moved different, slower, like she was testing each step to see if the ground would hold or drop away beneath her. She worked the hives every morning, same as before, but her eyes kept drifting to the tree line, to the road to the horizon where trouble would come from when it came. Because it would come. They both knew that. Silas found her on the 4th evening, standing at the fence line watching the sun drop behind the western hills. The light turned everything gold and red, the kind of color that made the world look like it was ending beautiful. You're planning to run, he said. I'm planning to be ready when I have to. That's the same thing. She didn't argue. Her hands gripped the fence rail, knuckles tight. The broken tusk caught the light when she turned her head. They know where I am now, she said. That merchant at the market, he was kind, but he'll talk. Word spreads. Someone will tell someone who tells someone, and eventually it reaches the people who matter. Your family. My family. The elders. Whoever's desperate enough to drag me back and force me into a position I was never supposed to fill. She pushed off the fence. I should leave before they come here. before they make this your problem. It's already my problem. You bought me with honey, Silas. That doesn't make you responsible for a $40 million inheritance dispute. He looked at her, really looked. At the scar on her face, the broken tusk, the shoulders that carried more weight than they should. At the woman who'd rebuilt his hives and his kitchen, and something in his chest he'd thought was dead for good. I didn't buy you with honey, he said. I traded 6 jars for someone in a cage. What happened after was your choice and mine. Nothing to do with inheritance or family or any of that. That's a nice idea? It's the truth. She smiled, sad this time. You're a good man, Silas Harding. Better than you think you are. That's a low bar. Maybe, but you clear it anyway. The sun finished setting. The sky went purple, then gray, then the stars started showing up one by one like they'd been waiting for permission. Stay, Silas said. Not a question, not quite a command, just a word put out into the air between them. Asha didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. I don't know if I can. That night, Silas woke to the sound of horses. Not close yet, maybe half a mile out. Multiple animals moving fast on hard ground. The sound carried in the cold air like a bell. He was dressed and out the door before Asha appeared from her room. She'd heard it too. She was pulling on the boots, the good ones that had been Sarah's, her hands moving with the quick efficiency of someone who'd packed and run before. How many? She asked. He listened. 6, maybe 7. Armed? Probably. She finished with the boots, stood. Her face was calm in a way that meant she'd already made peace with whatever was coming. You should go inside, she said. Lock the door. When they ask, tell them I left 2 days ago. You don't know where. I'm not doing that. Silas, I'm not doing that, he repeated, louder this time. You think I'm going to hide in my house while someone takes you, after everything? This isn't your fight. You rebuilt my hives. You got me laughing again. You made this place feel like more than a graveyard. His hands were shaking. Bad. Worse than usual. That makes it my fight. The horses were closer now. Quarter mile. Their hoofbeats like thunder that hadn't broken yet. Asha looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Held it. The shaking didn't stop, but it mattered less with her holding on. All right, she said. We do this together. They walked to the front of the house, together, still holding hands. The eastern sky was starting to lighten that gray pre-dawn that turned everything into shadows and suggestions. The riders appeared at the property line. 6 of them. All orc, all armed. They rode like soldiers, disciplined and spread out enough that you couldn't take them all with one move, but close enough to support each other. The lead rider was older, maybe 60, gray streaking through his dark hair, scars on his forearms that told stories he probably didn't need to repeat. He sat his horse like a man who'd been doing it 40 years and would do it 40 more. He raised one hand. The rider stopped. Asha Ironfang, he called. His voice carried across the yard easy. It's been a long time. Asha's hand tightened on Silas's. Uncle Garrick, your father is dying. The words hit the morning like stones in still water. Ripples spreading out, changing everything. How long? Asha asked. The doctors say 6 weeks. Maybe 2 months if he's lucky. The cancer's in his lungs, his liver. It's everywhere. Garrick dismounted, slow, careful, like he was approaching something wild that might bolt. He's asking for you. He didn't ask for me 5 years ago when the elders cast me out. He didn't fight for you, I know. Garrick stopped 20 feet away, close enough to talk normal, far enough to not be a threat. But he's dying now, and the family needs you. The family didn't need me when I had a broken tusk. The family was wrong. He said it flat, simple, like it was a fact he'd lived with so long it didn't hurt anymore. The elders were wrong, your father was wrong, I was wrong for not speaking up. We were all wrong, and you paid the price. Asha let go of Silas's hand, took a step forward. Why should I believe you now? Because the alternative is watching everything collapse. Garrick gestured back toward his riders. Darroch's run the business into the ground. 3 mines closed, $2 million in losses, workers laid off by the hundreds. The board is ready to sell to outside interests. 50% of our operation could be foreign-owned by Christmas. Let it burn. 4,000 people work those mines, Asha. 4,000 families depend on Iron Fang wages to eat, to keep their homes, to send their kids to school. You want to punish your father and the elders, fine. They deserve it. But those workers don't. Those families don't. Silas watched Asha's face, saw something shift there. Not surrender. Worse. Resignation. The look of someone who knew what the right choice was and hated it with everything they had. If I come back, Asha said slowly, I do it my way. I reform the succession laws. No more broken tusk exemptions. No more physical perfection requirements. Leadership based on competence, not appearance. The elders will fight you. Then let them fight. I'll win. She said it with the certainty of someone who'd been preparing for that fight her whole life. Those are my terms. Take them or leave. Garrick looked at her, at Silas, at the farmhouse behind them with its rebuilt hives and its smoke rising from the chimney. There's a man, he said, nodding at Silas. There is. Does he know what he's getting into? Being involved with the Iron Fang heir? He knows enough. Garrick studied Silas with the eyes of someone who'd evaluated men his whole life. Silas met his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Just stood there with his shaking hands in his farmer's clothes in his absolute certainty that he wasn't backing down. All right, Garrick said finally. Your terms, we'll present them to the board, but you need to come now. Your father doesn't have much time. I need 3 days. Asha. 3 days, she repeated. I have things to finish here. Hives to secure for winter. Obligations to settle. 3 days, then I'll go. Garrick didn't like it. You could see that in the set of his shoulders the way his jaw worked. But he nodded. 3 days. We'll camp at the edge of your property. When you're ready, we ride. The riders withdrew. Not far. Just to the tree line at the eastern border. Close enough to make sure she didn't run. Far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Silas and Asha stood in the yard watching them go. The sun was full up now, burning off the morning mist, making everything sharp and clear. You're going, Silas said. I have to. I know. She turned to look at him. You could ask me to stay. Would it work? No. Then why would I ask? They went inside. The house felt smaller somehow, like it knew what was coming and was already preparing to be empty again. Asha made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd made creamed honey, and laughed about spilled jars. Steam rose from their cups. Neither of them drank. I'll come back, Asha said. When I stabilize the company reform, the laws get the family on solid ground. It might take a year, maybe 2, but I'll come back. You don't have to promise that. I'm not promising, I'm telling you what I'm going to do. She wrapped her hands around the mug. If you'll wait. Silas's hands were shaking again. The coffee rippled in his cup, small waves catching the light. I waited 3 years in a barn, he said. Waited for guilt to stop feeling like drowning. Didn't work. Then you showed up and fixed my hives and made me laugh, and I stopped waiting for things to get better. They just got better. He looked at her across the table. I'll wait. However long it takes. I'll keep the hives alive. You'll have a place to come back to. Her eyes were wet. She didn't let the tears fall. Just sat there with them, gathering threatening held back by pure will. You're worth more than 6 jars of honey, he said. That's a low bar. Maybe, but you clear it anyway. She laughed. It broke something loose in her chest, and the tears came then quiet rolling down her face and dripping into the coffee that had gone cold between them. They spent the next 2 days working. Repaired the hive stands, replaced the worn-out frames, built windbreaks for winter. They worked from dawn until the light failed side by side, not talking much, but not needing to. On the second evening, Silas took her to the hill behind the house, to the grave that sat under the oak tree, simple headstone, Sarah's name carved deep. They stood there as the sun set. The wind moved through the ground, that particular sound of late autumn that promised winter, whether you were ready or not. She died 3 years ago, Silas said. Cancer, 18 months from diagnosis to the end. She fought it the whole way. Never complained, never gave up, just kept fighting until there wasn't any fight left. Asha said nothing, just stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Last day she could barely talk, Silas continued. Morphine had her most of the time, but she woke up once in the afternoon. Looked at me and said, "Don't live like you're dying with me." He pulled a weed that had grown up against the headstone. I didn't listen, moved to the barn the next week, stayed there 3 years. Let the hives die, let the house rot, let myself turn into a ghost. Then you bought me with honey. Then I made the single dumbest trade in agricultural history and somehow came out ahead. She smiled, turned to face him full on. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked if I'd be angry. If you went back to your family, did your duty. He met her eyes. They cast you out for a broken tusk. Now they need you because their competent leader turned out incompetent and the workers are suffering. You don't owe the elders anything. Not your time, not your leadership, not your life. But those workers are not your responsibility just because you were born into a family that controls their jobs. He took her hand. The shaking was still there. Always would be, but steadier now than it had been in years. But you're going anyway, because you can't stand the thought of 4,000 families suffering because the men who hurt you made bad choices, because you're the only one who can fix it. I have to. I know. He squeezed her hand. They ruined your childhood with their traditions. They stole 5 years of your life because of a broken tusk, and now they're asking you to save them from their own stupidity. You don't owe them that, but you're the only person good enough to do it anyway. She was crying now, full tears running down her face. That's why I love you, Silas said. The words simple, true, undeniable. Asha stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You don't have to say it back, Silas added. I'm not asking for. She kissed him, hard, desperate, like she was trying to pour every word she couldn't say into that single point of contact. When they broke apart, she was still crying. I love you too, and I hate that I have to leave. A broken tusk doesn't make you less worthy of being happy, Silas said. But 4,000 jobs might make you the only person who can save them. So go, do what's right. I'll be here when you're done. They stayed on the hill until the stars came out, until the cold drove them inside, until they'd said everything that mattered and some things that didn't, but needed saying anyway. The morning of the third day came too fast. Asha packed her few belongings in a canvas bag. The boots. The dress she'd arrived in clean now. The leather tie for her hair. Before she closed the bag, she walked out to the hives. To number 4, the one she'd rebuilt that first morning. She opened it, checked the frames, made some minor adjustments that probably didn't need making. Keep them warm through winter, she told Silas. Number 4 especially. She's got the youngest queen. She'll need extra food stores. I know. And check the moisture levels. If it gets too wet inside, I know Asha. She closed the hive, stood there with her hand on the top box. Broken things still have their use, she said quietly. We taught each other that. The riders were waiting at the tree line. Garrick had brought a horse for Asha, a good one well-fed with kind eyes. The sort of horse you gave to someone you respected. But before she could mount, one of the other riders shifted. His horse moved forward 3 steps, then stopped abruptly. The animal's ears went flat. It smelled something it didn't like. Silas felt it before he heard it. A vibration in the air, a shift in pressure. The way the world changes right before lightning strikes. The hives were humming, all 6 of them, louder than usual, building. Asha, Garrick said carefully, what's happening? She turned to look at the hives. Her eyes went wide. Then she looked at Silas. Understanding passed between them without words. The tremor in Silas's hands had stopped. Completely. For the first time in 3 years, his fingers were steady, and he was doing it, somehow, without thinking. The same way Asha moved slow and warm, and the bees trusted her, he was doing something, calling them, not with sound, with intent, with the desperate certainty that he would not let her be taken without her choice. Silas, Asha said quietly, what are you doing? I don't know. His voice was calm, eerily calm. But I'm not stopping. The hum increased. One of the horses whinnied, tried to back up. Its rider held firm, but you could see the uncertainty in his face. Garrick dismounted again, raised both hands, palms out. We're not taking her. She's coming of her own will. We had an agreement. You did, Silas agreed, but agreements change when I decide they do. The lids on all 6 hives rattled, just slightly, just enough to make the point. 60,000 bees, maybe more, all of them waiting. All of them listening to something they'd never listened to before. A human. A cold-handed human who'd finally learned what Asha had been trying to teach him all along. It's not about temperature, it's about trust. Stand down, Garrick said firmly, not to Silas, to his men. All of you, hands away from weapons, now. They obeyed, slowly, but they obeyed. Asha walked to Silas, took his hands, steady hands, no tremor. Let them go, she said softly. I'm choosing this. You know I am. Then let them go. He took a breath, let it out. The hum from the hives decreased, gradually, like a wave pulling back from shore. The horses settled. The riders relaxed fractionally. Garrick's shoulders dropped an inch. Impressive, Garrick said. It wasn't sarcasm. It was genuine respect. I've never seen a human do that. I had a good teacher. Silas looked at Asha. The best. She kissed him again. Softer this time. A promise instead of a goodbye. Hive 13, she said against his mouth. You're going to need to build Hive 13. The split from number 4 will be ready by spring. I'll build it. Leave it empty until I get back. I want to help set it up. How long? She pulled back, met his eyes. I don't know. Could be a year. Could be 18 months. The company's a mess. The laws will take time to change. But I'll write every week. And when it's stable enough, I'll come back. To visit? To stay. But I need to make sure those 4,000 workers have jobs first. That the reforms stick. That the company won't collapse the moment I leave. She touched his face. You understand. I understand. His hands were shaking again. Just slightly. The bees had quieted completely. I'll wait, and I'll keep the hives alive. She smiled through tears. You better. They're your livelihood now. She mounted the horse, settled into the saddle. Garrick and his men formed up around her, protective now, instead of threatening. 3 days to Iron Fang headquarters, Garrick said. Then the real work begins. I'm ready, Asha said. But she was looking at Silas when she said it. They rode east, toward the rising sun, toward iron mines and board meetings and 200 years of family history that she'd have to carry whether she wanted to or not. Silas watched until they disappeared over the horizon. His hands were shaking again, but less than before. The bees had taught him something. Or maybe Asha had. Or maybe it was both. Broken things still have their use. Even damaged hands can protect what matters. He went to the barn, pulled out lumber, and started building Hive 13. 18 months later, almost to the day, a letter arrived. Silas was working Hive number 7 when Helen's wagon pulled up. She climbed down slow, favoring her left knee, and handed him an envelope. Official Iron Fang stationery. Expensive paper. Been coming every week, Helen said, like clockwork. But this one's different. Heavier. Silas opened it, standing there in the yard, still wearing his beekeeping veil. Helen waited. The letter was 2 pages. Handwritten. Asha's handwriting, which he'd come to know from 18 months of weekly correspondence. Silas, the reforms passed. Took longer than I wanted, but the council voted 11-4 to eliminate all physical requirements for succession. Competence only. It's done. The company's stable. Durrock's been removed from the board. We've rehired most of the workers, reopened 2 mines, and the 3rd should be operational by spring. The finances are solid. We're making profit again. Father died 2 weeks ago. Pneumonia in the end. The cancer weakened him too much to fight it. He asked about you before he went. Asked if you were good to me. I told him you were the best person I'd ever met. He said that meant I'd learned to judge character better than he had. I'm coming home. Not to visit. To stay. The board agreed to let me transition to consultant status. I'll travel back 3 times a year for major decisions, but day-to-day operations go to the new leadership team. They're good, better than I expected. The company will be fine without me. I should arrive 2 weeks from the date of this letter. I'm bringing supplies for Hive 13 and some other things. Equipment for expanding to 20 hives if you're interested. I've been learning advanced beekeeping from a master in Montana. Thought we could grow the operation together. If you'll still have me. Silas read it twice, then a 3rd time to make sure he hadn't imagined it. Good news, Helen asked. She's coming home. Well, thank God. Took her long enough. Helen climbed back on her wagon. You might want to clean the house. It's been 18 months. I'm guessing it needs it. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring, Silas was working Hive 13 when he heard it. A wagon on the road, coming from the east, moving slow. He straightened up. Watch the tree line where the road emerged from the forest. The wagon appeared, pulled by two horses, loaded with crates and equipment, driven by someone he'd know anywhere. Dark hair, broad shoulders, the way she sat like she was born to it. Asha. The wagon pulled into his yard. She climbed down. She was wearing different clothes now. Well-made, expensive, but practical. Work clothes, not boardroom clothes. Her hair was longer. The scar on her face had faded some, but was still there. Still hers. The broken tusk caught the light when she smiled. "Hive 13 ready?" she asked. "Been ready for 6 months." "Good." She walked toward him, stopped a few feet away. "Because I brought the queen. Best genetics money can buy. She's in that blue crate. We should get her installed today." "You're staying." "I'm staying. Reform the laws, stabilize the company, trained my replacement. Told the board I was retiring to pursue other interests." She glanced at the hives. "Turns out beekeeping is a very compelling interest." "What about the 3 times a year?" "Board meetings, 3 days each at a time. I'll fly out, handle business, fly back. The rest of the time I'm here." She took a step closer. "If that works for you." Silas closed the distance between them, took her hands. His were shaking. Less than they used to, but still there. Probably always would be. Some damage didn't fully heal, but her hands were steady and they held each other up. "Broken things still have their use," he said. "They do." She kissed him, long and slow and with all the time in the world because they had it now. But sometimes they stop being broken. Sometimes they're just things that work different than expected. "Not complete," he said against her mouth, "but complete enough." They stood in the yard between the house and the barn, between 12 hives and one waiting to be filled, between the past that had hurt them and the future they'd build together. The bees hummed their approval. Silas's hands shook but less, and for the first time in 5 years, the farm felt like home. Not perfect, not healed completely, but alive. Growing. Good enough.